Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Super Subs Podcast, hosted by Harish, who is not going to be able to make it today. I know he had a conflict, but Harish and Narv, where two bros talk all things footy, drop takes hotter than a manager's seat after a five-game slump, and discuss who deserves the prestigious award of the Super Sub of the Week. I hope I didn't butcher that intro too badly. But I'll say my super sub of the week will be Lukaku for Napoli. Over the weekend in Serie A, they faced Verona, and surprising result, came in the second half and scored a late winner in stoppage time, to really hold on to that third place spot, which is a Champions League spot in Serie A. And today Roma faced Juve and they drew, so that worked out even more in Napoli's favor, since they're 2 points ahead of Roma for third place. So that's my super sub of the week. I think this episode I'll kind of go over just some of the Champions League results. I didn't really get to catch the game, so I'll just touch more so on the score lines before moving on into some of the Premier League matches and the matches around the world. So, Champions League wise, the round of 32 is complete. Just to give everyone kind of an overview, Atletico Madrid beat Club Brugge 4-1 second leg, 7-4 in aggregate. Leverkusen Olympiacos tied 0-0, but Leverkusen moves on 2-0 in aggregate. And Newcastle, second leg, they beat Korbag 3-2, 9-3 in aggregate. And the most surprising result of Tuesdays was Bodo Glimt. They pulled another win against Inter Milan 2-1, and they move on 5-2 on aggregate. On Wednesday, Atalanta, they beat Dortmund 4-1, made an epic comeback to move on 4-3 on aggregate. PSG got a 2-2 draw versus Monaco, so they kind of squeaked their way 5-4 on aggregate. Real Madrid 2-1 over Benfica. Of course, Vinny, he gets a goal to seal the win there. And of course, he gets no issues dancing back home in the Bernabeu. So Real Madrid move on 3-1 on aggregate. And one of the most entertaining ones of that day was Juve. They came back and actually won the game 3-2, but on aggregate they actually lost 7-5. So Galatasaray, they move on, getting two goals in. They get one goal in extra time and one in stoppage and one in extra time. So moving on to the weekend, there was actually quite a bit of entertaining matches. First one I'll touch on was just Burnley Brentford. Brentford, they looked like they were cruising to a maybe like a demolishing 7-0 type result. It's 3-0 in the first half, but Burnley kind of came all the way back, and they almost had a winner, barely offsides, and then Damsgaard gets a last minute goal, but then Ashley Barnes thought he got a last minute equalizer that gets ruled off. So that was just all epic. And then Man City, they hold on to beat Leeds 1-0. And this was the weekend Man City team missing Holland through injury. Nico O'Reilly came off injured. So those are not the best of signs. I think Holland, he's out till mid-March, so he may miss a few matches. And And then around the world that day, Barcelona versus Villarreal. This was one match I was really excited for, but it only seemed to go one way. Barcelona were quite dominant, and that the young superstar Lamine Yamal, he got his first career hat trick. Um, and Villarreal, they kind of made it interesting when they pulled it 2-1, but Lamine Yamal, he just got his third, and then after that, Lewandowski got the fourth. So Barcelona, with that result, they still remain on top of the table for La Liga. Next game around the world was the clash in Bundesliga versus Dortmund and Bayern Munich. This one was looking like it was going for a draw with Dortmund getting a late equalizer, but not even 5 minutes later, if so. Kimmich, he scores a absolute banger. Bayern Munich get a 3-2 win, and they just kind of extend their lead. Dortmund, I mean, Bayern Munich's just been so dominant, but like Dortmund, they've been having a good season. I know they just had kind of a spanking in the Champions League, but overall, they've really had a good season on paper. It's just unfortunate that Bayern Munich are so dominant. So those were really the games on Saturday, and then if we move on to Sunday, this one I kind of dive into the games a bit more. Um, I guess we'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room, but Man United, we are still undefeated in 2026. We got a 2-1 victory over Palace. I think this was a game we got a bit fortunate. I think first half we were totally off of it. Even though it was a home match, the players looked like they just woke up, threw on their jerseys, and went onto the pitch. Yeah, that first half performance was pretty diabolical, and it was kind of carried on from the midweek match we had on Tuesday versus Everton. I thought that game we played quite poorly. I think Everton, that one we played poorly first and second half. We kind of just escaped with the win from just individual brilliance, which sometimes that's all it takes, but individual brilliance with our trio of signings all getting involved for the winner. But versus Palace were definitely on the front foot. First half, I thought Sarr and Muniz kind of were really dominant on that right hand side. Lenny Euro, I don't know, he's been struggling a bit, and the goal that Palace scored, it was a brilliant header, but at the same time, one where I thought Lenny Euro could have dealt with better off a corner. Kind of was just man marking, didn't really track the ball. So Lacroix, he got quite a far header, to be honest, but it just got it perfectly in the corner. Um, and we kind of needed halftime to come just to regroup, reset. And I think second half we actually came out a bit stronger, played with definitely a lot more urgency. We were actually able to string passes together. Yeah, that first half was just a forgetful one to watch. Just everything, misplaced passes, loose touches from everybody. So second half, everything was a lot cleaner, crisper. And then, of course, our magician Bruno slips in a beautiful ball to Cunha, who gets taken down in the box, and that's where the game really changed. Lacroix, the goal scorer, ends up being, I think it was slightly harsh just because Henderson was coming out and I think could have gotten to it, but it was a penalty regardless. But Lacroix got sent off for being last man. I think the red was slightly harsh and really turned the game into our favor. So Bruno buries the penalty, and then as the second half goes on, probably not even, it's probably 10 minutes later, Bruno, brilliant delivery, and Šeško gets a header and the winner. Šeško also finally getting a start under Carrick. He's been in really good form. That's now, what I think, 5 goals in 7 matches. He has the most, I saw a statistic. He has the most open play goals in 2026, excluding, so that's like excluding PKs, which is quite impressive considering most of his goals have been off the bench. But I'll say today, star man was definitely, again, Bruno Fernandes, and I won't harp on it too long because I could go on for probably like days just talking about Bruno, how brilliant he is, but just the way he commands play, pulls the strings together for us, like some of the creativity. I know he had one where the corner was cleared out and then he just hits a switch back to Mboimo. That was insane. Um, and then I think this was one of Mbumo's quieter games. I thought it was. I feel for Ahmad getting dropped to the bench, but this is a type of game where Crystal Palace are sitting back, where I think you kind of need that target man in Šeško, and he's kind of getting rewarded too for just his recent performances. But Ahmad being on the bench has nothing to do with his form because Ahmad's been brilliant as well this year. So that took us up to third place because Villa had a shocking 2-0 defeat on Friday. Um, and while we are undefeated as of 2026, the Europa League champs Tottenham, they have yet to win in 2026. They took a 2-1 loss today versus Fulham. The other game that was going on in the same window as us was Brighton Forest. Brighton picking up a 2-1 win. And then the 11:30 window was the big one. I was fully hate watching this one. Needed a I just don't want Arsenal to win the league. Um, it's not a f- We've talked about them plenty of times on this podcast, but just not a fan of their playing style, kind of their antics of time wasting. But anyways, next game was Arsenal hosting Chelsea. And this one, um, I was definitely excited for it, but that excitement didn't last too long just because seeing Chelsea's bench, they didn't have that many options. Esteval was injured. Um, Even in their starting lineups, Fofana, he was suspended. Cucurella was injured. So they're missing a lot of key players. But Arsenal, listeners, you could probably guess how they get their first goal. Surprise, surprise, corner. Um, Saliba puts them up 1-0, but then right before halftime, Chelsea, they get a goal off a corner as well. Hincapie, I think, I always forget how to say his name. Hincapie gets a own goal flicked it onto his own net. And then second half, I thought Chelsea were the better team. But Arsenal, um, that hour mark, again, set piece, and Timber gets the goal. And I think takeaways from this game, I'd say today we saw Mr. Lightskin show up. Um, he was making me nervous, and I wasn't even on the field, so I can only imagine what his teammates were feeling. Uh, First few minutes into the game, had a loose touch. Gyökeres was on it, and then probably like 20 minutes again, loose touch, just ball goes under his feet. So he was having just some strange decisions, which I feel like sometimes that can set the tone. But Arsenal, I still didn't find them threatening at all. I'll be honest. First half, I think it was lacking some quality. Second half, Chelsea, I felt were the better team. They looked like they were the ones trying to do create something going forward. But after Arsenal got that second goal, it's a bit deflating. And Chelsea, they were just, I don't know, some of these players for Chelsea, I think they they haven't learned their lessons. Pedro Neto gets a yellow card for dissent, just because in that Timber goal, there is just some discussion where Chelsea players felt they were being impeded. So goal stood, and Pedro Neto arguing with the ref gets a yellow. And knowing you just got a yellow, nearing it's probably the 70th minute, if I can recall, makes a silly challenge on Martinelli. It's just a really poor challenge. Gets sent off, and now it's a lot more work. Already down 2-1, and you just kind of leave your team for dead. Which so I thought that was quite silly. I will say Raya, he did make some good saves. One instance of corner getting flicked on, and then João Pedro having an open header. Um, and then Garnacho had that teasing cross that kind of found its way headed towards goal, which again I thought was a great reaction save. So Arsenal 2-1 win, and they remain top of the table with a 5 point gap, but they do have a game in hand, or they played an extra game, and they've April 18th is when they meet City. So still time to bottle the league. Um, Around the world today, Roma versus Juve. That was I'm upset I missed that one. I watched the first half, and there's some back and forth going, and then second half, Juve kind of looked like they had control. So I was like, you know what? Let me get some of my chores done. As I was doing that, I missed the whole Juventus comeback. So that game ended up 3-3. And then also around the world, Marseille get a crazy 3-2 comeback. I actually had this game on while I was doing my chores. So Lyon, they went up 2-1 late. But Igor Paxiao, he was kind of a game changer. He got a goal earlier to equalize, and then he got a assist to Aubameyang, and then Aubameyang scored a winner, assisted by that youngster, that man, Ethan Wanyeri. So Harish would be proud. So that was all the games this game week. I think if we move on, we have a few midweek games. Just because I believe the weekend is FA Cup. So this Tuesday we have Bournemouth versus Brentford, Everton versus Burnley, Leeds versus Sunderland, and Wolves versus Liverpool. Wednesday we have a big one in Aston Villa versus Chelsea, Brighton versus Arsenal, Fulham versus West Ham, Manchester City versus Forest, and Newcastle United versus Manchester United. And then Thursday, we'll see if Tottenham can get their first win of 2026 as they face Palace. Around the world this week, I think the big one, let's see, I pull up FUT Mob. We got Como versus Inter in the Coppa Italia semis. We got Copa del Rey semi. Barcelona down 4-0 to Atletico Madrid. So that seems very slim that they can come back, but we will see. Um, and then the other Coppa Italia semifinal is on Wednesday with Lazio versus Atalanta. And the other Copa del Rey semifinal is Real Sociedad up 1-0 versus Atletico Club or Atletico Bilbao. And then on Friday, we have PSG versus Monaco. And then Saturday we have FA Cup of Mansfield versus Arsenal, Wrexham versus Chelsea, and Newcastle versus City. And then around the world, we've got in Spain, Atletico Madrid versus Real Sociedad, and Atletico Bilbao versus Barcelona. Sunday, we have AC Milan versus Inter Milan. So we've got the Milan Derby on Sunday. So I think that wraps all the games up for this week. I know I kind of touched more so on the United game, as I should. We are coming for a title, and what was Omar Barada's game plan? 2028? Yeah, so we got 2 years coming for the title. Um, with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for this week. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll be back next time to talk more footy, highlight game-changing super subs, and drop takes hotter than a Derby's day. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure to subscribe, drop us a rating, and share the pod with your friends and family. And until then, keep the football chatter alive, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.